I didn't lose my job because I was late. I didn't lose it because I made a mistake. I lost it because I cared too much. That's what my manager said anyway. For 5 years, I worked the front desk of a mid-sized corporate building downtown. Nothing glamorous. Beige walls, fluorescent lights, people who walked past me every day without ever learning my name. I was the woman who smiled, handed out visitor badges, answered phones, and noticed things no one else did. Like who came in limping, who forgot their lunch, who sat in the lobby a little longer than necessary because they didn't want to go home. Kindness was never in my job description. I gave it anyway. I paid for a stranger's parking when the machine ate his last dollar. I let an exhausted intern sleep in the waiting area during a double shift. I brought coffee to the night janitor when his hands shook from the cold. Small thing, quiet things. Until one of those things cost me everything. The email came at 9:12 a.m. Please come to Human Resources immediately. No warning, no explanation. I remember smoothing my uniform, telling myself it was probably nothing. A form, a schedule change. I had no idea I was about to be told that my kindness made people uncomfortable, that it blurred professional boundaries, that I was no longer a good fit for the company. They walked me out before lunch. No goodbye. No thank you. Just a cardboard box and a door that closed behind me. What they didn't know, what no one in that building knew, was that one person had seen everything. And that person was about to change my life in a way none of them could have predicted. Losing the job didn't hurt the way I expected. What hurt was the silence that followed. No calls, no messages. No one from the building checked in. Not the executives who smiled at me every morning. Not the HR manager who said my name wrong as she handed me the termination papers. Not even the people who had once thanked me quietly for listening when no one else would. I sat on the bus that afternoon, holding my box on my lap, watching the city move on without me. Office workers stared at their phones. A woman argued softly into a headset. Life didn't pause just because mine had cracked open. I told myself I'd be fine. I always told myself that kind people learn early how to do that, how to absorb the weight so others don't have to carry it. Rent was due in 2 weeks. My savings could stretch maybe a month if I skipped a few meals and canceled everything that made life feel human. I started applying that same night. Front desk positions, reception, customer service, anything that didn't ask too many questions. But interviews have a way of revealing truths you're not ready to explain. Why did you leave your last job? They asked. And every time I saw it, the shift in their eyes when I said the word terminated. When I tried to explain that I hadn't stolen or lied or failed, that I had simply been too kind. No one knows where to place a person like that. Days passed, then weeks. I started volunteering at a small community center in the evenings, helping where I could. Old habits don't disappear just because your badge stops working. I helped seniors fill out forms. I watched children while their parents worked late shifts. I made myself useful without expecting anything back. That's where I met him again. I didn't recognize him at first. He was older than I remembered, dressed simply, sitting alone in the corner during a budgeting workshop. He looked familiar in the way faces sometimes do, like a memory you can't place. When our eyes met, he smiled. Not politely, not vaguely, but like someone who had been waiting. "You don't remember me," he said gently. I shook my head, embarrassed. "I was the man whose parking you paid for," he said. "The day the machine broke." Something clicked. He had been flustered, late, ashamed that he didn't have enough cash. I remembered how his shoulders relaxed when I told him it was fine, that it happened to everyone. "I never forgot that," he continued, "and I never forgot you." I laughed softly. It was just a few dollars. He studied me for a moment, then said something that made my breath catch. It was the day I decided to stop watching people and start listening. I didn't know it then, but that conversation, the one I almost brushed off as nothing, was the beginning of an ending no one could have expected. I didn't think much of him after that first conversation. People say meaningful things all the time. Most of them don't mean anything by it. I thanked him, helped set up chairs for the next session, and went back to my routine. That was my instinct. Move forward. Don't linger. Don't expect. But he kept coming back. Every Tuesday evening, he sat in the same chair. Always early. Always quiet. Sometimes he asked questions about budgeting. Sometimes he just listened. And every time before leaving, he stopped by my table. "How are you holding up?" he'd ask. No one had asked me that in weeks. I gave him the answers people expect. "I'm okay." Still applying. Something will come up. He never pushed. He never offered advice. He just listened like time wasn't something he needed to guard. One night, after the center had emptied and the janitor was locking the doors, he waited with me outside. "You were good at your job," he said. I smiled politely. "You don't really know that." "I know enough," he replied. "Good receptionists don't just manage schedules, they manage people." That stopped me. He knew details, small ones, that I brought coffee to the night staff, that I let a nervous intern cry in the lobby once, that I noticed when someone was hurting and pretended not to see. "How do you know all that?" I asked. He hesitated, just a fraction of a second. "I notice things too," he said. A few days later, he offered me a ride home. I declined at first out of habit, but it was raining hard and the buses were delayed. His car was older than I expected, clean, unassuming. Nothing about it suggested wealth or importance. During the drive, he asked about my life, not in a curious way, but in a careful one. Where I grew up, what I wanted before life narrowed my options, what kindness cost me. I told him the truth. That being kind didn't feel like a choice, that it felt like a responsibility, that sometimes it felt like a flaw the world kept punishing me for. He nodded slowly. "The world doesn't punish kindness," he said. "It tests who's watching." When he dropped me off, he handed me a folded card. "Come see me tomorrow," he said, "if you want." I opened it after he left. It wasn't a business card, just an address, a time, and a handwritten note at the bottom. "You deserve to be in rooms where kindness isn't a liability." That night, I barely slept. I didn't know who he really was. I didn't know what he wanted, but something told me that the life I lost at that front desk wasn't the one I was meant to keep. The building wasn't marked. No sign. No logo. Just a quiet glass entrance tucked between two law offices downtown. I checked the address twice before stepping inside, convinced I had misunderstood something. The lobby was nothing like the places I was used to. No front desk, no security gate, just clean lines, natural light, and a calm that felt deliberate. A woman greeted me by name. That should have been my first clue. "Someone will be with you shortly," she said, smiling in a way that felt practiced, but kind. I sat down, hands folded in my lap, telling myself not to imagine things. This wasn't a job interview. He hadn't said it was. He hadn't said anything, really. Just come see me. When he appeared, he didn't look any different from the man I'd shared bus stories with. Same quiet presence, same steady eyes. "Thank you for coming," he said. We walked through corridors lined with framed photographs, buildings, community centers, hospitals. I recognized some of them. I had passed by a few during my commute years ago without ever knowing who owned them. We entered a conference room. That's when it hit me. The people inside didn't stand when I walked in. They stood when he did. I froze. Introductions followed, names I had seen in headlines, voices I recognized from interviews played on TVs in break rooms, board members, directors, advisors, people who never waited in line, never rode buses, never worried about parking meters. "This is the woman I told you about," he said calmly. All eyes turned to me. Not curious, not dismissive, attentive. He asked me to tell my story. I tried to keep it short. I talked about my job, about being let go, about volunteering. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't ask for sympathy. I never had. When I finished, the room stayed silent. Then one woman spoke. "You were fired for being kind?" "Yes," I said quietly. The man beside her leaned forward. "And no one defended you?" I shook my head. That's when he finally told me who he was. Not with a title, not with numbers. With a sentence that rearranged my understanding of everything. "I own the building you worked in," he said, "and several others like it." My breath caught. He wasn't just the man whose parking I paid for. He was the man whose property I had been escorted out of. "I didn't see you that day," he continued, "but I saw what came after. Complaints, reports, language about liability and boundaries. All because you treated people like they mattered." The room shifted. "I didn't bring her here for charity," he said, looking around the table. "I brought her here because our systems are broken. and she exposed that without ever trying to. I sat there, heart pounding, realizing something terrifying and unexpected. I hadn't lost my job because I was weak. I lost it because kindness threatened systems built on indifference. And for the first time since being fired, I understood that the ending of my story wasn't going to be quiet at all. The meeting ended without applause. No one rushed to congratulate me. No one offered me a job on the spot. That wasn't how rooms like that worked. Power moved quietly, deliberately, and only when it had decided the cost was acceptable. He walked me out himself. "I won't ask you to do anything," he said as we waited for the elevator. "But I needed you to know something." "What?" I asked. "That what happened to you wasn't small and it wasn't isolated." The elevator doors closed. By the next morning, my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Emails, missed calls, messages from numbers I didn't recognize. A former coworker texted first, "Is it true?" Then another, "HR is freaking out." By noon, my name was circulating in places I had never intended to reach. An internal review had been announced. Not publicly, not yet, but enough for people inside the building to panic. Managers started rewriting narratives. Decisions suddenly became miscommunications. Policies were misinterpreted. The word kindness disappeared, replaced by corporate language meant to soften damage. And then came the pressure. A representative from my old company requested a meeting. Neutral tone, polite phrasing, urgent subtext. They offered me a settlement, generous, quiet, conditional. All they wanted was my signature and my silence. I stared at the document for a long time. The amount would cover my rent for years. Medical insurance, stability, everything fear tells you to grab when it finally loosens its grip. But it came with one sentence that made my chest tighten. The employee agrees that no wrongdoing occurred. I asked for time. That evening, I met him again. This time not in an office. In a small diner near the river. No suits, no assistants. Just two people and coffee that tasted like it had been sitting too long. "They're scared," he said after I showed him the offer. "I am too," I admitted. He didn't try to convince me, didn't tell me what to do. He just asked one question. "If you sign this," he said, "will you still recognize yourself?" I thought about the people I used to help. The intern who cried in the lobby. The janitor with shaking hands. The seniors at the community center who trusted me with their forms because I never rushed them. "I don't want revenge," I said quietly. "I just don't want this to keep happening to people who don't have options." He nodded. "Then you already know your answer." I left the diner knowing one thing for certain. Being kind had already cost me my job. Now it was about to cost me comfort. And whatever came next would show me exactly how much the truth was worth. I didn't sign the agreement. I emailed HR a single sentence. "I will not be accepting this offer." They replied within minutes, suddenly less polite. Lawyers entered the conversation. The tone shifted. What had started as concern became warning. That's when the story stopped being internal. An anonymous post appeared online first. Then another. Someone leaked details about the internal review. A local journalist picked it up, not because it was sensational, but because it was familiar. A woman fired for being too kind in a system that punished anything it couldn't measure. My phone rang again. This time it was a reporter. I hesitated. Saying nothing would keep me safe. Speaking would expose everything. I thought about the front desk, about how easy it was to be erased when you sat behind a counter, about how silence was always cheaper for people like me. So I spoke. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't accuse. I told the truth the way I always had. Plain, quiet, unpolished. I explained how kindness became a liability, how boundaries were used as a shield for indifference, how being human had no place in a system built on efficiency alone. The story spread faster than I expected. Former employees reached out. People I'd never met shared similar experiences. Different buildings, same language, same outcome. The company released a statement, carefully worded, apologetic without admitting fault. Then came the call I didn't expect. He asked me to meet him again, this time with others present. Not executives, not lawyers. Community leaders, nonprofit directors. People who worked in buildings but didn't own them. "I'm starting something," he said, "and I want you to decide if you want to be part of it." He explained the plan slowly. A new management model. One that trained employees not just on policy, but on people. One that measured success by retention, trust, and dignity, not fear. I don't want a figurehead, he said. I want someone who understands what it costs to do the right thing without power. I felt the weight of the moment press into my chest. What if it fails? I asked. Then it fails honestly, he replied. That's already better than most systems. I said yes, not because it was safe, but because it was necessary. And when the announcement went public, people didn't focus on him. They focused on me, the woman who was fired for being too kind. And for the first time, that phrase didn't sound like an accusation. It sounded like a beginning. I didn't become famous. That's the part people assume wrong. There were no book deals, no viral interviews that turned my face into a symbol overnight. The internet moved on the way it always does, quickly, impatiently, chasing the next outrage. What stayed was quieter. The building where I used to sit behind a desk changed its policies. Slowly, carefully. Not because they wanted to, but because they had to. Training sessions were rewritten. Managers were warned. Complaints were no longer buried as miscommunication. Some people lost positions, others learned. As for me, my days stopped being about answering phones and started being about asking better questions. I worked with teams who had never been taught how to see people before. I sat in rooms where kindness had once been dismissed and watched it become a metric instead of a weakness. Not perfectly, not easily, but deliberately. And sometimes, this still surprises me, I run into people from my old life. A former executive once recognized me at a coffee shop. He hesitated before speaking like he wasn't sure whether he was allowed to. I didn't understand it back then, he admitted. Why it mattered? I nodded. Most people don't, until it costs them something. He didn't argue. The man who noticed me, the one whose parking I paid for, never asked for credit. He never corrected people who assumed I was his idea. He knows the truth. Kindness didn't need saving. It needed space. The last time I walked past that old building, I stopped for a moment. I watched the front desk through the glass. A young woman sat there now. Nervous, focused, trying to do everything right. She smiled at someone who looked like they were having a bad day. No one stopped her. I turned away before emotion could catch me. I wasn't fired for being too kind. I was fired for revealing a system that didn't know what to do with people who still believed humanity mattered. And the ending no one expected wasn't revenge or success or recognition. It was something far quieter. I kept my kindness, and this time it didn't cost me everything. It built something better.